Wonderful. Good afternoon, everyone. I am very pleased to be here with all of you. My name is Bassam Haddad. This is In Defense of Academic Freedom, session number 6. We've had several sessions prior, which I might share with you. And we are delighted to be here. First of all, I'm delighted to be here with my first time co-moderator, Lara Deeb, Professor Lara Deeb. And I will be introducing her in just a moment. We're here with the remarkable folks who will tell their stories, and we will be addressing a number of related themes that we have always addressed in this series. Andrea Brower, Michel DeGraff, and Anna Feder. Please correct my pronunciation if I messed up. This is again session number 6. And it is organized by a number of organizations, actually, co-sponsored or organized originally by the DC, Maryland, and Virginia Faculty for Academic Freedom, the Gaza in Context Collaborative Project. It's co-sponsored by MESA Task Force on Civil and Human Rights, MESA's Committee on Academic Freedom, Faculty for Justice in Palestine Network, faculty and staff now for Justice in Palestine Network, which is now 140 plus chapters around the country, and also co-sponsored by Palestine Anti-Repression Network. We will be covering this session and publishing it on PalestinianContext.org, where you will find all the sessions and all of the Gaza in Context Project sessions. More than 100 so far, more 120 actually. So let me basically turn to Lara Deeb and introduce my co-moderator, Lara Deeb, who is a professor of anthropology and MENA studies at Scripps College. She has published widely on Lebanon, especially in relation to gender, Shiism, piety, youth, Hezbollah, and sectarianism. Her most recent book is Love Across Difference, Mixed Marriage in Lebanon. She has also published on the politics of knowledge production in relation to the Middle East, including Anthropology's Politics, Disciplining the Middle East. And the recent article, Resistance to Repression and Back Again, The Movement for Palestinian Liberation in U.S. Academia, both co-authored with Jessica Winiger. It is my pleasure again to introduce Lara. Lara, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Bassam. It's a pleasure to be here with you all, though, of course, I wish it were under different circumstances. And good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining us for this ever more timely conversation. As I'm sure many of you are aware, the assault on academic freedom is intensifying on university campuses. This series takes note of cases of defamation, intimidation, and suspension that faculty are being subjected to across the United States and beyond. We aim to raise awareness regarding the conditions and pretenses under which this sort of violation takes place. Today, in the 6th session, we'll address a number of issues, from investigations over regular activities to suspension, letting go, and/or firing. We'll be speaking with 3 faculty and staff members who were targeted by their universities, each with a now familiar story to share. Stories that will help us all better prepare to navigate the new repressive normal on university and college campuses. So we'll begin today by hearing from Andrea Brower, an activist and scholar from Kauai. She's an assistant professor in the Solidarity and Social Justice program with Gonzaga University's Department of Sociology and Criminology. Her research, writing, and teaching on capitalism, imperialism, the environment, and agriculture is embedded in social movements for collective liberation and ecological regeneration. So I'll turn it over now to you, Andrea.
Thanks, Lara. It really is an honor to be in conversation with you all, though, of course, this topic is quite devastating. I'll just start with generally situating myself in academia. I kind of stumbled into academia through my rootedness in a range of social justice struggles. So for me, and I'm sure probably many of us here, the primary point of being in this space is to question and resist oppression in all forms and imagine human possibilities beyond the present, which in institutions that are all also primarily reproduce dominant ideology has frequently been an uncomfortable and unpopular and a marginalized position, and is increasingly, as we know, a dangerous one. In the case of Palestine, much of my own teaching and activism is focused on the role of capitalism and U.S. imperialism. as the global context in which Israeli settler colonialism and genocide operates, the really remarkable dehumanization, racialization, and supremacist ideology that rationalize and sustain such violence, and then also the operation of power and propaganda in convincing so many that this is an inevitable state of affairs, just some innate human conflict versus the product of human systems and ideologies that can be confronted and challenged. So I really attempt to challenge in all of my scholarship the various ways that this dystopia we find ourselves in is normalized. So for this position against supremacism, imperialism, capitalism, and their violences, and for mutual human safety and freedom and liberation, I have faced a whole variety of harassment. My story is familiar, and I don't know that the details are actually particularly interesting. I'm an organizer. I've spoken at rallies. I write a bit. I think, at least I hope, that my classes encourage student organizers. I'm involved in the Palestine solidarity and interconnected struggles in a whole variety of ways, both in and outside of academia. So I faced the predictable backlash, signs being ripped off my door, hostile security guards stalking around my office late in evenings when they think I'm not there, defamation, bullying from senior colleagues, hate mail. Familiar with Title VI, it's part of the Civil Rights Act. So similar to Title IX, it mandates that schools and universities receiving federal funding respond to and resolve any complaints that allege discrimination based on race, religion, or national origin. In the case of Israel and Palestine, Title VI has been weaponized in really quite extraordinary ways and become a central tool to repress the Palestine solidarity movement by conflating any criticism of Israel state actions with anti-Semitism. So in the past year and a half, there have been an avalanche of these types of Title VI complaints filed against activists in universities. This has been, at least in part, a well-coordinated, highly resourced top-down effort with groups like Stand With Us, the Anti-Defamation League, Hillel, the Brandeis Center, offering support to file these Title VI complaints, which anybody can file even if they have no connection to an institution. So to take one example, Zachary Marshall, who's the editor of the very reactionary website Campus Reform, has alone filed dozens of these at multiple schools. So this haunting rise of anti-Semitism at the top and on the far right, including at campuses like my own, where Turning Point is now the largest club, is being largely ignored and at times even being defended by some of these very same groups that are attacking leftist students and faculty for their position on Palestine. One very blatant example being the ADL's defense of Elon Musk. I want to quote Rachel Shabai, who's a British Israeli author. She wrote in The Guardian recently, if anti-Semitism is so blatantly wielded as a political weapon, it creates the impression of a fundamental unseriousness about the subject. And this very right-wing weaponization of anti-Semitism is especially targeting progressive Jews that are standing for Palestine. So it's all very, very dangerous and maps onto the fostering
Andrea, are you with us?
I think she might have some internet issues here.
Yeah. Yeah, she may be delayed by her network. Let's give it a couple more seconds. Andrea, if you can hear us, you might want to sort of reboot. We're not at the point where, like Syria in the 1980s, where the actual session is cut off in the middle by the authorities. We're not there yet, I hope. Okay, I think we have waited long enough because I don't want to keep everyone waiting. Lara, what do you say we move to our next speaker, and then return to Andrea? Is that
That makes
okay?
sense.
All right. Well, let me introduce Michelle, and I will. I don't know if I should leave Andrea frozen, but if we can get in touch with her and just let her know to reboot, that would be great. Let me introduce Michelle, and we will move forward from there. Apologies for any inconvenience to our audience. All right, so it's my pleasure to introduce Professor Michel DeGraff. I'm not sure if it's the correct spelling, the correct pronunciation. Please let me know. Michel was professor at MIT Linguistics from July 1996 until November 14, 2024, just recently, when he was given the title Faculty at Large at MIT's School of Humanities, Arts, and Social Sciences. Michel is co-founder and co-director of the MIT Haiti Initiative, founding member of Académie Créole, you're going to help me out here at some point, Haitienne, and fellow of the Linguistic Society of America. Michel's research contributes to an egalitarian approach to Creole, indigenous, and other non-colonial languages and their speakers, as in his native Haiti. In addition to linguistics and education, his writings engage intellectual history and critical race theory, especially the links between power and knowledge hierarchies or power and knowledge hierarchies and the hegemonic misrepresentations of non-colonial languages and their speakers in the global south and beyond. I think Andrea is back with us. So let's see if perhaps we can let Andrea finish. Michelle, I'm sorry for the false start. Habibi, I apologize. The world's not being kind to you. Andrea, are you good to continue?
Yes, I'm so sorry. I have no idea where I went frozen. My internet is full strength, so I'm not quite sure where I am.
Feel free to just skip the introduction and move forward, because we also need to be able to catch up.
Yes. Okay. So I just wanted to get to some general effect, kind of reflections that these are highly isolating attacks, and that is the intent and something we need to fight back against. There can be this kind of internalized silencing and isolating effect, and that is why it is so essential to see them as targeted political attacks and collectively fight back against them as such. So in part because of the silencing effect, it's really difficult to know the extent of these attacks. Even just accounting for known cases, it's evident that there are hundreds of people from K-12 up through university that have faced investigations and or disciplinary action. And most of this is going virtually unreported in media. And this is really just the tip of the iceberg. There's a lot more of what you might describe as lower level repression, although it's really not low level. So people being told to take signs off their door, being hassled by colleagues, being disallowed from bringing speakers or films to campus. Then even beyond that repression, there's the general chilling effect and the innumerable ways that public discourse about Palestine and Israel has been severely narrowed, scripted, and infused with fear. So it appears to me that many of my colleagues are reluctant to even say Palestine, much less to allow conversations in their classes. And this is something we really need to be giving our colleagues the courage to collectively stand up against, because accepting this McCarthyism has implications far beyond Palestine. Last couple of reflections. It has been largely liberal universities and their administrators that were enshrining authoritarian tendencies with their response to student protests long before Trump. And then, of course, Trump and the Project 2025 oligarchical agenda is seizing these inroads to authoritarianism. But groundwork was already being laid by liberal actors in liberal ideology that clings to notions of stability and civility over justice and dissent, and liberal ideology that fits far too comfortably in an extraordinarily brutal capitalist world order. And I think it's incredibly telling of where profit-driven capitalist higher ed has taken us, that just before a regime aiming for authoritarianism took power, universities themselves were already deciding to do things like essentially ban protest and critical inquiry and dissent and truth-telling. So we now have a state that is pursuing even more repressive and tyrannical crackdowns. And while the Palestine Solidarity Movement is on the front lines of this, their aim is to crush all dissent, to make an enemy of all struggles that stand in the way of tyranny and oligarchy. You know, we talk a lot in academia about intersectionality of oppression, but we're really going to need to grow our movement's abilities to engage in intersectionality of struggle. And in this regard, I don't think that the fear and shock and awe can be all that we focus on. Yes, we need a sharp analysis of what we are up against, but that also means sharp analysis of our own power, knowing that if enough ordinary people take stances of non-cooperation and disobedience and defiance and commitment to our common humanity, we can begin to win the world that the vast majority of us want. And I'm so sorry for losing you midstream there.
No worries at all, Andrea. We also apologize because you were cut off. I'll cede the floor to Lara. No, actually, I already introduced Michel. We introduced you. Do you need to say anything, or should we just move on? I'm joking. Please go ahead.
Michel's
I
up.
apologize again because I introduced you and then Andrea came back.
No.
Let me just say very quickly, Michel DeGraff is professor removed from MIT linguistics on November 14th, 2024, with a new title as faculty at large at MIT School of Humanities, Arts, and Social Science. Please, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Bassam and Lara, for inviting me. And I'm so honored to be in companionship, in solidarity with Andrea and Anna. And Andrea, thank you so much for the way you lay out this new normal that we're facing. And you gave us such a beautiful view of the history of repression. And you're so right that this started long before Trump, because my case started actually in November of 2023, just a month after October 7th. And so obviously this was not Trump, it was much earlier than that. And what I want to do in my own contribution is to present my case as a case study to show the depth of what you just described, Andrea, the fear, the silence that so-called liberal progressive colleagues have bought into. Because I think in a way my case is quite telling, because I am in MIT linguistics, and I spent my entire career studying the intersection of linguistics and decolonization and liberation. And I think that's the reason why I was invited to be part of MIT linguistics, because when I started being invited to come to MIT linguistics, it was at a conference where I gave a talk about Haitian Creole, and there was these two stalwarts of the use of language for liberation. It was Wayne O'Neill and Ken Hale. Both of them have passed, and they were stalwarts. And one attraction to come to MIT was the sheer presence, the sheer thought of being a colleague of Noam Chomsky, who, for decades, has been such a strong voice, for disobedience, showing the depth of the empire in the case of Haiti, in the case of Palestine. So I still remember, my first week at MIT being in the bathroom next to Noam Chomsky, and some of my friends would ask me, "Do you get to see Noam?" And I would say with a big smile, "I even get to shake with Noam," meaning in the bathroom. So this was 28 years ago, right? And now, for you to understand the disappointment that I went through in November, when, in the very spirit of what I learned from Noam Chomsky, I wanted to propose this seminar looking at the ways in which language and linguistics are essential for both domination but also for liberation. It was a shock that my colleagues repressed that proposal. But let me step back a little bit, actually, before 2023. Let's go back to, because I want to show you the depth of the hypocrisy among so-called liberal progressive colleagues, right? Because my work, the work that I'm being penalized for, is one that's been recognized by MIT and by peers both near and far, including the premier organization in linguistics, the Linguistic Society of America. And so let me give you a sample of the appreciation. First, at MIT. So 9 years ago, in February 4, 2015, MIT awarded me a beautiful plaque at its annual celebration of Martin Luther King's legacy. Okay, so the plaque was titled MIT Martin Luther King Jr. Leadership Award, and maybe Bassam will show it to you on the screen. And so this was an award for my work on linguistics and social justice, right? So this was a testament to the importance of my scholarship for activism. And the celebration was hosted by none other than MIT President Raphael Reif at the time. So Bassam, can you show a photo of that very impressive plaque made of glass? Actually, it's a very heavy plaque. And
Michel,
that plaque,
I'm sorry, the version you've sent, it's just not taking on this program, but I'm going to, as you speak, I'm going to fix this and put them up.
Thank you, but not to worry too much if you cannot show it. But so it's a beautiful plaque made of glass, very heavy. But now that plaque is heavy in other ways, because of what it says, in light of what I've been told recently by my colleagues in the past few months, in the context of the violations of academic freedom. So the plaque says, MIT, Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. Leadership Award presented to Michel DeGraff, whose achievements and contributions exemplify the ideas of Dr. King. Now, for you to get a sense of the, quote, achievements and contributions that exemplify the ideals of Dr. King, I read for you part of the speech that I gave to thank MIT for this leadership award. If you like what I read from it, you can read the whole thing in the January-February 2015 issue of MIT's faculty newsletter. But basically, this award was for my work on language and linguistics for decolonization and liberation. Okay, so there I said in that speech, in Haiti, barriers to full citizenship are brutal, right? And here I'm going to edit a little bit. And today, I would add that these barriers are not as brutal as those against Palestinians in occupied Palestine, from the river to the sea. Now, let's go back to the speech now. So in Haiti, these barriers have been entrenched through language and education throughout the history of the country, all the way back from the colonial period, when much European wealth depended on the work of enslaved Africans, my ancestors. Back then, my ancestors were treated as beasts of labor, not as minds to be educated. In Haiti today, most Haitians are excluded from access to education, to quality education, and from the means to create and transmit wealth. Indeed, most laws and decrees, most written press, most textbooks, most exams are written in one language, French, which the vast majority of Haitians do not speak. Yet, most everyone in Haiti speaks one language in common, Haitian Creole. This linguistic barrier has been so entrenched in the Haitian psyche that one can call French in Haiti a linguistic, quote, bluest eye, unquote, to borrow a phrase from Toni Morrison. Too many Haitians have been socialized from birth to accept class-based prejudice. They have learned to accept that if they don't speak French, it's their own fault, and as such, they do not deserve anything better than second-class citizenship at the pit bottom of one of the worst levels of socioeconomic inequity in the world. The Creole phrase "nous pas moun," meaning we are not human beings, is a frequently heard complaint from those who speak Creole only. Okay, so I'm going to skip now, and so I get to this paragraph. This linguistic apartheid has been encoded, and let me stress the word, this linguistic apartheid has been encoded deep in the DNA of Haitian society from the birth of the Haitian nation in 1804, even as our enslaved ancestors were liberating themselves from French colonial chains. Today still, Haitian minds are shackled in neo-colonial linguistic myths. So in effect, Haiti is still very far from MLK's dream, but the MIT Haiti initiative, which I created with colleagues at MIT, is dismantling these age-old barriers that have been implemented through language and education. So you can read the rest of the speech, but what I want to stress here is that this MLK Leadership Award was given to me for my work using linguistics to, quote, dismantle colonial barriers that have been implemented through language education. Now, let's step forward to 2022. And this is what I was nominated for and then awarded the highest honor in the field of linguistics, a fellowship in the Linguistic Society of America, and so which I will just call LSA for short. It's a mouthful. So this LSA award, so one of the letters for the nomination by Brian Joseph, Professor Brian Joseph, who was president of the LSA in 2019, this is what he wrote on my behalf. He says that Michel, quote, dedicated his energies to the eradication of linguistic discrimination globally in the protection of the language rights of minorities, again on a global scale. And then the letter of Brian Joseph talks about my concern as a scholar activist about, quote, the devalorization of colonized and otherwise minoritized communities, which is embedded in systematic patterns of hegemony, where language and education are enlisted as tools for colonialism from both inside and outside. Okay? Now, and this is where now it gets even more heavy in light of what happened to me at MIT Linguistics starting in November 2023. So, because when I'm going to read for you kudos I got from my own department head at MIT about this LSA fellowship. And this was part of an article published in MIT News about this award. So I'm not sure whether, okay, thank you, Bassam, for putting this up. Now, this article says, Professor Michel DeGraff named a fellow of the LSA. Selection as LSA fellow marks the highest honor in the field of linguistics. And the article explains that this fellowship was awarded to me for, quote, scholarship into the history and linguistics of Asian Creole that goes hand in hand with its long-standing activism. And then the article quotes me as saying, this fellowship doubles as a most valuable appreciation for the often undervalued work that my MIT Haiti team and I have been doing at the sweet spot where decolonial inquiries and advocacy in linguistics, education, and social justice intersect. And now here's the quote from my own department head about the fellowship. In that 2022 article in MIT News, my department head celebrated the honor as a recognition of, quote, DeGraff's multifaceted, socially minded approach to the field, as well as recognition of his outstanding scholarship, unquote. And then he stated, quote, it is good to see a professional organization like the LSA promoting scientists, not just for the research, but also for the kind of activism that might accompany it, battling prevalent misconceptions about the nature of the world, identifying the detrimental consequences, and fighting for change. We are all very proud. Now, let's move on to the repression for the theoretical extension of the very work I've been doing now for more than 2 decades. In fall 23, just 1 year after the kudos in MIT News, I proposed a special topics. Now, this is key because special topics at MIT Linguistics are designed to cover materials not covered in the regular curriculum. So this was a special topic seminar to advance knowledge. Now, advanced knowledge is a slogan in MIT's mission, and create expertise through extension of my previous work. The extension I proposed was in the familiar context of my previous research on language and linguistics for decolonization and liberation. But as soon as I proposed this title to my department head, I was met with unprecedented scrutiny and even insults that were shouted at me. Now, do you remember that department head, what previously praised my, quote, multifaceted and socially minded, unquote, work, and again, I'm quoting, activism in battling prevalent misconceptions about the nature of the world, identifying the detrimental consequences, and fighting for change? Well, it's the same department head who now, once he saw my proposal with that title, Language and Linguistics for Decolonization and Liberation, he formed an ad hoc committee to review my proposal. And then this committee claimed that I lacked expertise and scholarly competence despite my extensive publications and experience and the kudos they themselves had given me for that work on language and linguistics for decolonization and liberation. And they argued that the course did not fit the curriculum, even though it was a, quote, special topics course with a course number designed by the department itself to explore new areas that are, quote, not covered in the regular curriculum. They also objected to by having too many guest speakers. Well, guest speakers have been a regular staple of my teaching for the past decades, and other colleagues also have guest speakers. In fact, there are courses that are designed exclusively with a guest speaker in mind, in the case of unfamiliar languages. Now, in my analysis, the rejection was based on political, not academic grounds. My department head had openly disagreed with my views on Palestine and Israel, even using expletives during a Zoom call because he disagreed with my evoking the Holocaust in my analysis of Israel's genocide of Palestinians. He also objected, and I have been writing, he objected to my use of the terms genocide, colonial, and Jewish donors. He objected to that prior to rejecting my proposal. So this blatant and politically driven disregard for academic freedom and viewpoint diversity is really, as Andrea had mentioned, a chilling example of the new repressive normal on college campuses. And this goes way before the election of Donald Trump. Okay. So now, and I think it's also, we're talking about viewpoint discrimination, but there's also something quite racist because in the review of my proposal, I said, well, it's fine if you do that work in the context of Haiti, but you cannot do it, in the context of Israel and Palestine because you don't know enough about the region. You don't even speak the language of the region. When in 21, I gave a course on linguistic social justice where I covered Jamaica, Barbados, Venezuela, Trinidad, Mexico, the US, Shetland, Ireland, Australia, Hawaii, Mauritius, Seychelles. That was a seminar where I covered the same issues in all these communities, and there was no flag being raised. So why is it that in the particular case of Israel and Palestine, all of a sudden I have no expertise to be able to extend my research in these areas? So, but despite the rejection, I was determined to teach the course, even as a non-course. So what I did is to teach it as a people seminar, a speaker series with the support of MIT's Office for Mind and Heart, and also MIT's Women and Gender Studies. And we had a superb cast of guest speakers. And what I did also is I kept publicizing the story of this repression, through email, through op-ed essays, because it was so incensed that this would be happening in the very department that Noam Chomsky had made famous, and given that my colleague had claimed that I lack expertise. But however, that disobedience, thank you, Andrea, for calling us to disobedience, but the consequences were, well, not as severe as being bombed by, 1,000-pound bombs in Gaza. Obviously, it was very far from that. But I was suspended, from my department, transferred to an ill-defined position of faculty at large. And I was also subjected to very discriminatory investigation by MIT Human Resources based on the students' totally frivolous accusations. And I was denied a pay raise, and I've been facing ongoing harassment. But there is a silver lining. So the non-course happened, and to me, it was extremely successful. I learned a whole lot. I did help advance knowledge. I did help create expertise. And the course materials are now archived by MIT OpenCourseWare, and they will be shared. Just want to told us strength in liberal institutions will have more courage and speak against this repression. So thank you for hosting me.
Thank you so much, Michel, for all of that. And both you and Andrea have given us a great deal to think about, I think. But first, let's turn to our third panelist. As you mentioned, it'll be Anna Feder. Anna Feder is an educator, curator, filmmaker, community builder, and activist based in Boston and Providence. Anna has over 25 years of experience in curating in Providence. Anna has over 25 years of experience in curating and creating cinema environments, including the Bright Lights cinema series at Emerson, which she has been running since its inception in 2012. Last fall, her position was eliminated and the series was canceled due to her activism in support of Palestinian liberation. She has served as a consulting producer on The Palestine Exception, which is a fantastic film, and offers her services to films on Palestine that are looking to connect with audiences. She currently organizes with faculty and staff for justice in Palestine at Emerson, the Palestine Anti-Repression Network, Film Workers for Palestine, and the group Food Not Bombs. Anna, you have the floor.
Thank you. So thank you to Bassam and Laura for the invitation. It's an honor to be in conversation and building community with you all. So Emerson College in Boston was my professional home for over 17 years, very close to where Michel is at MIT. I was hired a year out of an MFA program, and I had the honor of founding and overseeing a successful, much-loved, free, public, social justice-focused film series that boasted an average of attendance of around 75 a screening, a number that had dipped when we returned to in-person screenings in 2022 and had only just recently rebounded. In the summer of 23, I put together my program for that fall, including a film by Sam Eilertson, whose footage I had included in a short documentary that I'd made. And Sam lives in Providence, where I'm based. And I'd been following the production of Israelism with significant interest. I knew I wanted to screen it as part of my series before the film was completed. And I initially planned to screen on November 9th. I went about building community support for the screening, as I always do, but particularly where a film is going to be critical of Israel. I was partnering with the Boston Palestine Film Festival, as I did every fall, if not now, Jewish Voice for Peace, Kavod, the Boston Workers Circle, and I reached out to the director of spiritual life, Hillel, the only, at the time, recognized Jewish group on campus, and traditionally less conservative than Hillel International, and then a handful of faculty members who I regularly collaborated with. Before October 7th, I had received only a few messages, one from a concerned faculty member and then from a trustee. Neither had seen the film, and I assured them both that I programmed with the utmost care and planned to have a thoughtful dialogue with the filmmakers who are both going to be there in person, and that, of course, we're all Jewish. Because of a trustee's involvement, I was asked to meet with the president, who had only been there a few months at the time. This was our first meeting, and I was assured that it was okay to proceed with the event as planned. After October 7th, I started receiving more text messages from the concerned trustee and was called into another meeting with the president. I was made to postpone under threat for the future of my program. Also, I was told I would need to have armed police there inside the cinema, which has never happened. And that the college would publicly, quote unquote, disavow the screening. I negotiated for a few concessions that I could announce the new date along with the postponement. I could be transparent with my audience that this was not my decision, and that I could keep the cinema dark on the original screening date. I was told that the film had to be postponed to the spring and that it couldn't be the opening screening. So that meant that February 1st of 2024 was the first available date. I partnered with 3 more internal groups that had all organized in the fall of 2023. Our chapter for Students for Justice in Palestine, Faculty and Staff for Justice in Palestine, of which I'm still a member, and Jews Against Zionism, a student group for which I was asked to serve as an advisor. The college still disavowed in a statement they posted to Emerson today. I had planned to read the statement, but I'll just recap the most important part. That says that the college doesn't condone or endorse or support the film's content, meaning Israelism, either by Emerson College or by my department, Visual and Media Arts, and that they. I'll just say this. Emerson prides itself on being a community of diverse people and perspectives that values social justice and free expression while also protecting our community from bias, threats, and intimidation. So I was told a few days prior that I would need to speak to someone from the Emerson Police Department to arrange for them to be present at the rescheduled screening. I received over 1,000 external emails that were also sent to the president of the college and other folks who manage this cinema space, claiming that, quote, showing this movie denies reality, incites further terror and violence, and opens up for more bloodbaths, and opens up a major security risk on your campus for Jewish students. So I received only a few more emails from folks in the Emerson community, and I offered them a seat in the screening and an opportunity to ensure that they got to ask their questions of the filmmakers. And of course, none of them took me up in the offer. Despite all this, it was the most successful screening in my 17 years at the college. We packed the house, all 180 seats, and about 50 to 60 who were turned away had an impromptu screening down the street, and then they joined us for the conversation on Zoom. We had a 45-minute formal conversation and a 45-minute informal conversation, all without disruption. After that, the college couldn't maintain the narrative that events discussing Palestine or critical of Israel were a security threat. And so many more followed from talk by folks from the Palestinian Feminist Collective on Zoom. And then we also had an in-person panel with students, faculty, and staff who are Jewish and anti-Zionist, myself included. The first round of arrests took place on our campus only a few weeks later at the president's lavish inauguration. A dozen Emerson students and one student from a different institution were arrested on a public sidewalk outside of the Cutler Majestic Theater, where this coronation was taking place. When I found out, I drove into the city to ensure that our students were greeted with warm food, a hug, and a ride home. I was there when our students heeded the call from Columbia and set up their Gaza Solidarity encampment in late April, the first in Boston. I was there for about half of its 80 hours. I spent most of my time organizing donations. Community members came with foods, blankets, bottled water, books, rain gear. And I also helped with trash removal and kept watch overnight the first few nights. I was there when roughly 300 city and state police in riot gear came to dismantle the encampment and brutalize our students. I live streamed at the request of the students, and you can still find that recording on the Emerson FSJP Instagram. Students are you still able to see me and hear me? Okay, I'm getting a little delay on my end. So yeah, the students had actually packaged up, we got more donations than we could ever possibly use. And they had been planning to distribute to unhoused folks who'd been spending time in the encampment and then in the nearby Boston Common. So 118 were arrested in the early hours of that morning on that Thursday. And I went to the furthest precinct in the city to make sure that these students felt loved and supported by elders in their community. On the eve of Juneteenth, the college announced low enrollment. And as far as I know, the college has never shared the actual numbers and said it would be laying off staff and closing programs. On June 28th, the last session of a professional conference that I attend every year for film exhibitors, I gave a talk entitled Hosting Difficult Conversations in Your Cinema. And here's the description. So this session will begin with a case study of the screening of Israelism, originally scheduled at Emerson College on November 9th, 2023. This event was the target of a nationwide campaign to shut down screenings, as well as internal pressure from the college. After months of case making by the programmer, myself, the film was finally screened on February 1st, 2024 to a full house plus an overflow screening off-site with over 240 moviegoers. What could have been a polarizing conversation in another setting became the conversation we all hope to create in our cinemas, one of openness, but also one that challenged audience members, asking them to step outside their long-held beliefs and engage with those who they might otherwise dismiss. So this case study will dive into how that space was created and offer insights for how it can be created in other exhibition spaces. After the presentation session, participants will break into small groups to discuss their own experiences, holding space for difficult dialogue and brainstorm strategies to share with the wider exhibition community. So then on August 13th, I was told they were closing my series and laying me off. I was the most senior of the staff, laid off in quotes, and the only union member. Another one of the folks who was also terminated was a member of FSJP and an anti-Zionist Jew as well, who had also supported our encampment. I was offered a substantial severance from the college, about 35 weeks, in exchange for withdrawing my union grievance, which asserted that my layoff was subterfuge for cause, claiming that I was fired for engaging in activity that the college didn't approve of, for which I never received an informal warning or any formal discipline, and then also for agreeing to not, quote unquote, disparage the institution by talking about my dismissal. Of course, I declined, and I'm currently on unemployment and continuing to organize with my colleagues and students at Emerson College to expose repression at the institution and to advocate for Palestinian liberation. That's my story.
Thank you very much, Anna, and thanks, Michel and Andrea. We're going to go for about half an hour with some questions that we have for you. I will start, if you don't mind, Lara. So basically, if you can tell us, and I'm going to ask this question instead of going, one by one, I'll ask the question. Feel free to respond in the order that you spoke to these questions. It's actually two questions in one. The first one is, what role, if any, did your institution's principles of academic freedom and freedom of expression play? Something that you could share if you like. And what kinds of rights or due process have you or others, whose cases you are familiar with at your institution, been granted or not by your university? And what lessons might we draw from all of this?
Sure. Yeah. Thanks, Bassam. So I'll start with my own case in the second part of that question, as far as rights that have been given to me by my university. Because I went on a pre-approved medical leave the day after my first 3-hour interrogation, I and my lawyers that are representing me, have been denied the right to participate in my investigation in any way until May. So in essence, I will be on trial for 5 months with no representation or ability to advocate for myself. I have been completely denied the right to participate in this process. So more generally, I think what you can draw from my case and what I've observed from many other folks in conversations is that universities are really failing to have consistent policies or analysis with which to navigate cases like my own, whether these cases are imposed from the inside or the outside. They are often making things up as they go, which tends not to fare well for those who are being investigated because they don't have firm and clear rights to stand on. I think the bigger point here, maybe, and expanding on the original points that many of us brought up, is that universities are failing to recognize the ways that their own structures and policies are radically insufficient for dealing with the reactionary attacks to come. And I think this is maybe one of the spaces we need to be mobilizing around. As far as kind of principles of academic freedom, we're a private institution, so we are less held by the law on these principles, but we are supposed to be a mission-based institution, one that is humanistic, social justice oriented, standing with the poor and vulnerable. And I was really thinking, as Michel was talking about, these tensions in universities as a site of struggle, that universities are in large part places that reproduce dominant social relations and ideology and are profit driven. And there is really a market for us activist scholars, right? Our activist scholarship has become a commodity for the university, really. But as soon as this really starts to threaten racist empire, it becomes unacceptable. And our freedom of speech is really shut down. I'll pass it over to you, Michel.
In the case of MIT, actually, it's interesting actually, because I'm in the Department of Linguistics and Philosophy, right? So you would expect such a department, given, you have philosophy of ethics, you have people who do semantics and pragmatics. So you would expect a very high bar when it comes to applying academic freedom, right? That's what I also expected. In fact, in 2022, we had a long series of faculty meetings about this very topic, because there was a speaker who was supposed to give a speech, and he was found out that he had strong ideas against affirmative action. And it was a speech that was supposed to be attracting students to Black students to MIT, minority students to MIT. And he was disinvited. Actually, he was given a different forum for where to speak. And he used that, his name is Abbott, and he used that he wrote in the New York Times and various other places about, the fact that MIT canceled him. And there was an uproar about this, and MIT decided, okay, we have to have some deep soul searching to come up with principles for academic freedom. And at the end of that series of faculty meetings, there was a document about what academic freedom means. And interestingly, in that year, myself, I said, well, there has to be some constraints about what we can say. We cannot, if students are in our classroom and we say things that make them feel uncomfortable, there should be a limit to that. If you want to respect the students' right to learn, so therefore you need to watch what you say as a professor, because you have power. And I was told by a colleague who came to my office, actually one of the same department, and actually told me that no, we have to believe in absolute free speech, because absolute free speech is the only way to counter bad speech. So then when it came to my seminar being repressed, obviously they had to give some rationale as to how to explain the repression given the position about academic freedom. And I have to read for you, the argument that they gave, because remember, this is linguistics and philosophy, and my dean is a philosopher of logic and language. So what they say is that, well, regarding, I'm quoting from the review of my course proposal, regarding freedom of teaching, in this context, it is important to remember. Actually, let me go up a bit. So our concern about expertise in your course proposal is not addressed by guest lectures. An instructor must have expertise in the area they wish to teach in, and it is wrong to outsource this to others. In this context, academic freedom does not grant faculty permission to teach whatever they want. Instead, it protects the faculty's right to teach material within the areas of expertise. See report on academic freedom and free expression by MIT. And they even give the page numbers, page 7 and 8. Now, when you go to this report on free expression, what does it say about teaching? It says, regarding freedom of teaching, faculty do not have total discretion over the course content. For example, a class titled, quote, beginning Chinese, unquote, cannot be taught as an advanced calculus class. So if you were to take that argument seriously, it means that when I teach about language and linguistics in the context of social justice, in the case of Palestine and Israel, it's like beginning Chinese in advanced calculus. I hope that I don't have to give more details for you all to understand how ridiculous this argument is, to compare my extending 2 decades of my research about language and politics, to extend that in Israel and Palestine is comparable to a professor in mathematics teaching about Chinese. You see, that's the kind of argument that I got around this issue of academic freedom. And I guess it goes to show that ideology will always trump logic. And in fact, this kind of contradictions, in fact, it's something that Noam Chomsky himself had taught us, that when you find these contradictions in the writings of very intelligent and well-educated scholars, what you need to do is to understand the roots of contradictions. And the only way to understand the roots is to look at the ideology that underlies them, right? So I think I'll leave it at that. And in terms of due process, well, I'd be happy to share documents. In fact, I wrote a piece in the student newspaper, the Tech, where I basically outlined the entire process that I went through. And at every stage, there was no due process. Even when there was a review of the review, so the vice professor for faculty at MIT, she said, well, we have to review the process that you underwent. And I wasn't told who was on that panel that reviewed the course. I wasn't told what they used, what documents they used in the review. And I was never interviewed by this panel that was supposed to review how my course was rejected. So it was a total kangaroo court. And the same when it came to my being, removed from my department. There was no process. There was no due process. I was not invited to defend myself, in terms of the accusations that they leveled at me. So it's, yeah. I'll stop here. There's a lot more to say, but I think that should be enough to give you a sense of the total contradictions that we see in these cases.
And for me, I was staff, one of the vast majority of academic workers who don't have the protections of academic freedom. And as the college has indicated in their interim protest policy they just announced in August, it's important to note that Emerson College is a private institution, not a public forum, and is not subject to the First Amendment protections of the U.S. Constitution. So there has been no involvement from the community in crafting this policy. They call it interim, and that's how they get around actually having a process of buy-in from the community. And there's a group on campus calling themselves the Right to Protest Coalition that is currently crafting a new policy with involvement from the entire community. And as I was in the staff union, I was covered under collective bargaining agreement. I had the right to expect progressive discipline for any activities that the college administration was unhappy with. Of course, that would open their actions to public scrutiny and to appeals by the union. And I believe, and my union agrees, that the college circumvented our CBA by disguising my termination as a layoff for for purely financial reasons. So that's why I'm, currently engaged in a grievance against the college for my firing.
Thank you, all of you, for all of that. You've really collectively highlighted the ways that academic institutions are manipulating ideas of academic freedom, or making up policy and practice on the fly, or applying policies and principles inconsistently, especially when it comes to Palestine, and even, writing new policies and practices, often in nefarious ways, sort of as things unfold. So I want to switch and ask you now all to speak a bit about sources of support, or perhaps lack thereof. And there's two different areas here, or two related questions. So one is, what sources of support have you found on your campus and in your community, or what were absent that could have been beneficial? And then also, what kind of support or response, again, if any, did you receive from some of the national organizations that are dedicated to protecting free speech rights or academic freedom, like the AAUP, the ACLU, even FIRE? And perhaps we could go again in the order that you've spoken.
Sure. Yeah. Yeah, there's quite a bit of duality to my answer, right? I've been very, very moved, actually, by the very small but very strong and courageous group of colleagues and communities that have supported me in ways that actually make themselves more vulnerable. It's quite moving to even think about. And I've also been connected with people like Anna and Michel across the country, really across the world, that are facing similar things. And these networks, kind of informal networks of support, have been very uplifting. Just to be in community with folks that are bravely standing up to all this has been quite uplifting. It's also just given me really material support. That said, where one might assume a wider sense of outrage on the part of colleagues, say for violations of academic freedom that they might also suffer from in material ways later down the road, that kind of wider sense of outrage has been completely absent. I have been met with a lot of silence. And I think it is really a testament to the Palestine exception, and also actually how much anti-Palestinian racism exists amongst our colleagues, which we need to be honest about. Orgs, I'll just answer quickly. There are a handful of orgs, I'll also add to that Palestine Legal, that are doing really essential, tremendous work supporting folks like us. They are very spread thin with this barragement, so I think we need to kind of bolster the infrastructure that they have. At Gonzaga, I'm non-unionized, but the AAUP and UAW have actually both been quite responsive and helpful, even though I'm a non-member. And it's helped me see the ways that I think organized labor can be maybe not a primary, but one small piece of the puzzle of the force that has formal political rights to fight fascism. Because had I had a UAW or AAUP on campus, I probably would have had at least somewhat more extensive rights. Pass it over to you, Michel.
Well, on the positive side, I would say that what I found the most heartening in the past few months in this struggle has been the students. In fact, if anything, the students have been the real teachers in this entire struggle. With the encampment that they've had, with the various, they've invited folks to speak so strongly against the genocide, and they keep reminding us what's at stake, and they're engaged in all sorts of mutual aid efforts. And to me, that's been probably the most inspiring. When it comes to the faculty and the staff, there's been some very valiant faculty and staff who have spoken up, who've organized various activities. But that's been, unfortunately, the minority. In fact, I'm very sad to say that, there are folks that I thought, who were friends, who were on the same moral compass that I thought we had together, which became suddenly very silent. I've had colleagues avoiding even to greet me in certain contexts, and that's been very hard to process. As for AAUP, there is a chapter right here at MIT, and and I've been told now for a couple of months, if not more, that they've been working on some kind of a statement, and I hear that they have to investigate. They don't have to, it's been very silent on that front. And last week, actually, there was an op-ed, a guest editorial in the faculty newsletter, by a colleague inviting faculty members to join the AAUP chapter. And I think that I understood at that point the depth of this Palestine exception, because that op-ed inviting folks to join the chapter of AAUP at MIT, it was titled something like "A Call for Courage in the Face of Rising Anti-Semitism, Misogyny, White Supremacy, and Authoritarianism." And since I knew the author and I knew that it was an ally, I kept looking for the call for courage to also face anti-Christian racism, to face it, to protest the genocide. And there was nothing of that sort. There was this huge gap that was left in this call for courage. When in fact, if you look seriously at rising anti-Semitism, you have to understand where it's coming from. It's coming from the very same poles of power that are also um, supporting the genocide in Gaza. Many of them anti-Semitic, Christian Zionists, who believe that it's best to have all Jews go back to Israel so that we can have the second coming of Christ. And this is anti-Semitic, but it's also very anti-Palestinian racism. And for a call for courage to not mention that is, to me, was very striking. But again, it goes back to Andrea, to what you referred to as the Palestine exception. And I've also tried, fire, and no, there's been no response. But I think, luckily, there is this Palestine anti-repression network where I got, and here I'm very thankful to Anna. And there again is the power of solidarity. So thanks to Anna, I got connected to this network, and then that's why I got to meet Andrea, and I've gotten way more support from that network of faculty spread across the US than I've gotten from very near colleagues, some of them friends. So I'm very thankful to you all for that network of solidarity.
And I also found support largely from students, but also from faculty and staff who've been organizing at great personal and professional risk for Palestinian liberation. One of those I have to mention is the chief steward of our union, our staff union, who is Jewish and Israeli. And she's been sort of a target as well for being one of my most vocal supporters. I wish the rest of the union leadership had been more proactive in protecting the rights of staff to organize for Palestine. By and large, they've operated largely in defensive mode. So neither the staff or faculty unions have worked to protect academic freedom and freedom of speech. The staff union was not protecting my freedom to engage in the work that I do as a curator, which should be protected under academic freedom, but instead has only been working to save my job. What I really wanted them to do was to file a charge with the National Labor Relations Board, arguing that my support of the student encampment constituted concerted protected union activity because SCIU, the national union, had called both for a ceasefire and an arms embargo. So I knew it was like a little bit of a stretch, but I was hoping for a little bit of, I don't know, a little bit of initiative in being proactive with all of this. And unfortunately, there was no support from our local in pursuing this approach. So, but then yes, the Palestine Anti-Oppression Network has been an enormous source of support and resources and solidarity and camaraderie, and it's been pretty exceptional.
Thank you all. And I guess I think I'm going to turn it over to Bassam for the next question. But that was, again, we really appreciate all of your responses and for helping us sort of see the larger, broader context and picture and experience of this moment of repression.
Thanks, Lara. I have a question for everyone, but before I do that, I would like to just share with you a couple of things for those people who have uh, been joining us or just joined. This is essentially a screenshot or the website where you can find the previous events of In Defense of Academic Freedom. You can find this on palestineincontext.org, and you could simply go through um past the past events. Let me see over here. Where is it? Okay, so this is the first event that we. This is the last event, actually, the most recent event on research on targeted faculty intimidation and defamation. The previous event was this one was with Imaya Gelman and Isaac Kamola. A very informative event about the repression on campuses and the silencing of folks and denial of free speech and so on, and who are the organizations that have been most active behind such efforts. The previous event was the event prior was by or with Maya Wind, Sarah Al-Hamoud, and Shahrazad Hode addressing the case of Israel specifically, and Nadala Shalhoub Kevorkian. The one before was with also faculty that have been suspended, Jody Dean and Muhammad Abdu. And the one before was similarly with Danny Shaw and Lisa Hoffman Kuroda. And the first one was with Jairo Funes, who has since regained his position, and Maura Finkelstein, who has not, unfortunately. So I just wanted to share this with you before we go on. My question is again to everyone. And if you can briefly, because I'm aware of time, speak to the tensions between being quiet and speaking out about your case, because a lot of people are wondering about this and what others or other movements might consider in these regards, in your opinion, and what impact do you have, or what impact do you hope to have actually by sharing your story? What would you like to come of this? Do you have any advice for others navigating this particular repressive moment at their institutions along the lines that you have experienced? If you can please address this briefly, because we have one more parting question and then we're going to have to conclude.
Sure. Yeah, I'll start. So it is a difficult question to answer because the safety concerns have gotten all the more extreme with the emboldenment of reactionary forces. And I know too many people across the country that are facing and have faced very serious, very scary threats to their safety. And then, of course, also their material jobs, their material security, their jobs. But at the very same time, the entire point of the reactionary movement against us is to create this isolating, chilling, silencing effect. So it must be resisted. And the more ordinary people that are brave to all of the interconnected forces of totalitarianism and oppression that we're up against, the safer we all are. The more all of us do what we can within our own spaces, the safer we all are. So while I wouldn't want to encourage anybody to put themselves in danger, I think for me, this whole experience has been a really kind of potent reminder that real solidarity does often entail making myself more vulnerable to stand for those that are already far, far more vulnerable than. And I guess that's the advice I have. I'll pass it along.
Yeah, I think I'll just follow up on that. And Andrea, I think you've said what's there to be said in terms of, if we're silent, then that's it. We might as well close shop and go home and stop teaching. Because you see, I have people ask me, so you Haitians, so why do you bother with discourse in Palestine? But well, it's because I'm Haitian that I have to, to talk about this, because how can I be teaching about decolonization and liberation through language and linguistics, and I see this misuse, this abuse of language, that the notion that Zionism equal anti-Semitism equal Judaism, the idea that you take those two concepts and you equate them. That's a linguistic issue. And if I'm fighting for language to liberate Haitians, then I should also be fighting for language to liberate Israelis and Jews and Palestinians alike. Because if you live in these lies, then you deny not only the others, the humanity, but you deny your own humanity. You see, and here again, I must praise the students for risking. We have students who now they are suspended for 2 years. They have so much more to lose than we do. They lose jobs. I mean, there is this kind of remission that least most. I think I haven't counted, but so many of the faces there, they are students' faces who have to try to get a career. And we faculty, some of us have tenure and are still silent. Why do we have tenure for? You see, so I do believe that I mean I've gotten death threats now since November 2023. I wrote a piece in the faculty newsletter about stopping the hate, stopping all hate, not just hate against Jews. We should stop that hate. We should stop all kinds of hate. That was the point of the piece, and I got death threats because of that. So should I not say that we're all humans? Should I be afraid to say that we all deserve to be respected? So so no, I think that we cannot be silent. And those who are silent, shame on them.
Yeah, I was fairly public at every stage, from screening Israelism to supporting the encampment to being terminated. And, I think the only way to fight repression happening on college campuses and across the country is just to get louder and to build solidarity. That's what's going to, protect us. The only tension came for me was in deciding to decline the college's severance package because it came at a significant financial cost. And I know I would have weighed that differently if I'd had dependents. But I want to encourage folks to fight back. That's why I'm sharing my story. We don't fight fascism at home and abroad by allowing our communities to be targeted and trying to protect whatever privilege we have, right, at that moment. And unfortunately, many of the colleagues on college campuses don't see how all of this impacts them yet, but they will. And it shouldn't have to impact them personally for them to act. I was the first person terminated probably for Palestine at my campus. I won't be the last. And it was really easy to pick me off because I was one of the loudest voices. But if, more people had stood up,
Exactly.
it would have, yeah, we would have, all of us would have been in a much better, more secure position.
Exactly. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you all for that. And before I think I'm going to ask the final question because we're close to the end of time, but I also just want to thank you all again for your courage and your candor, especially in the face of the silence and the threats that you've received and everything that you've just been describing. So as a final question, and you can sort of speak to whatever piece of this you want, I just wanted to ask you, where have you been putting your energies, or, how have you been continuing the fight, or what have you been working on, however you want to think of this, since the repression, the loss of employment, the censorship, the defamation, right? So what is happening now?
Can I interject quickly?
Yes.
We put on screen an email that you could email us at if you or someone has been subject to any similar form of discrimination, suspension, intimidation. I know that from my own case, for instance, on a weekly basis, that there is harassment happening for almost anything we say, or sometimes don't say sufficiently. Feel free to email us at sc@palestineandcontext.org. SC stands for Secret Committee. No, I'm joking. This is not the Ba'ath Party cell that was formed in Egypt in the late 1950s. This is the steering committee at palestineandcontext.org, which is the organization that the collective collaborative project that brings this and other events together. So please feel free to email us, and we will get back to you.
I guess it's to me. Yes, thanks. where's my energy been? I guess on the work we're all speaking to, right? Building the solidarity networks, organizing work both with students and off campus, the Palestine Solidarity Movement, and the much wider interconnected struggles that we're all involved with. My wage labor future feels very uncertain at this moment, but the commitment to the struggle is there, and is what sort of animates most of what I do. So,
Well, in some ways, I'm thankful for my colleagues to have gotten my course outside of linguistics, because as they did so, I did discover that, in fact, these issues speak to folks beyond linguistics. And again, thanks to the students and thanks to the encampment, I've been able to see all kinds of connections between the liberation of Haiti and that of Palestine and that of the Dalits in India. So, like 2 weeks ago, there was a student from MIT, Tara Rin, who invited a Dalit speaker to come to campus, and we're able to spend a week together and discussing all the making of caste across societies, and where, so caste is a skeleton, and then what you have is the skin of race or gender or language. And it has been so heartening to work so closely with students who share these deep moral values for collective liberation. So there's one group which is MIT Jews for collective liberation, and we've learned so much together in this struggle together. And one thing that I'm doing now is to expand that work. In fact, I just finished a very long paper comparing the history of Haiti, the erasures in the history of Haiti with the erasures in the history of Palestine. And what you see when you do that work, you see that the issues are really the same. It's the same playbook. It's like the book about erasing history in the making of fascism. You see it happening over and over again. So solidarity really not only is the version of love in politics, but it's also the best way to expand our knowledge. Unlike what my colleagues were saying in linguistics, that you cannot teach about Palestine because you're Haitian, basically, you have to teach about Haiti. And it's so limiting, it's so anti-intellectual, but it's also dehumanizing. So what I've learned in a way is how similar we are across these struggles. And here I'm most thankful to the students for that, for having taught me that. So, and I'm going to spend more time working with them on these topics.
Yeah, and I've spent the last 4 months applying to jobs in higher ed, and I am shifting now to organizing work and trying to find a job in organizing. But I worked for a few months as an exhibition consultant for the Palestine exception, which you mentioned in my bio. But this is what I'm really excited to tell you about, is that I just joined a team of filmmakers who were students at Columbia last year, and they were embedded with their encampment. And so right now they have a piece that's like just under 30 minutes, and they've got a little bit of funding, but they're going to be launching a fundraising campaign to turn it into a 45-minute film, and it's going to be available by about mid-April. So I'm helping them to put on to lock screenings at college campuses around the country for that sort of 1-year anniversary of their Gaza Solidarity encampment. And then I'm also starting a traveling film festival with a friend called the Resistance of Vision Film Festival, and we'll have 4 programs of short films: 1 racial justice, environmental justice, gender and reproductive justice, and housing and labor justice. And they're going to be in-person screenings in May in Boston, San Francisco, and Wichita, Kansas. And so I'm open to organizing with aligned organizations, and then ones that are working for liberation for us all.
Great, thank you. Actually, I wanted to just add the name of, I mentioned the Dalit speaker who came to MIT. It's Bhumika Saraswati. So if you have a chance, look her up, and then you'll see those connections between liberation in India, and that in Palestine, and that in Haiti, and that in the US. And this is a work that I'm really enjoying doing now.
Thank you all for just I don't know what to thank you for enduring, and for being steadfast and continuing to do what you're doing. You're an inspiration to all of us, and I hope that as we speak out and as people listen and act, that we are pushing back, so that this sort of environment can either, you know, ceases to get worse or at one point gets better. It's a very difficult time, and we appreciate your joining us and your time and your energy and your insights. We will, of course, keep up with all of you as we have and as we try to keep up with all of our guests, because this is not just a podcast. This is like this is our lives, and we're all in it in a very similar fashion in this major mess, which is not likely to subside, unfortunately. So thanks again. Thanks to Andrea, Anna, and Michelle, and thanks to Lara for joining me. I hope you can join me again as co-moderator. And let me just say that there is another series titled Long Form that is hosted by Moin Rabbani and myself and Sinan Antoun at times as a guest host. And this Thursday at 2 p.m., which is basically March 6th, at 2 p.m., we are speaking with Talal Asad. It's quite a long conversation. It's called Long Form. And we will also be touching on matters dealing with free speech, academic freedom, and the university setting, and sort of the context within which what is happening now is occurring. Thank you all again, and hope to see you soon under better circumstances. Shukran.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
Salam.
It's good to be in community with you all.
Hala hala.